Hey, I'm Michelle, and this is episode number 15, Simple Steps to a Healthier Environment. And I'm going to apologize for the audio on my part. I thought I had my microphone on, but I didn't. But you'll still hear some great stuff from my friend, Elisabeth. Welcome to the I Cut the Mustard show, where a plant-based diet and small, simple moves make healthy change happen. And where we believe that you already have what it takes to slice through any barrier that stands in your way. Shing! You're sharp enough. You cut the mustard. Okay, so a few weeks ago, I was talking to my friend Elisabeth Bannatyne. I'm not even sure how we got on this topic, but I was venting my frustration about how much plastic I waste every week on my vegetables from the grocery store, and how I can't buy cauliflower without it being all wrapped in plastic, and the carrots always come in a bag and things like that. So then there's all those tubs for the salads and the spinach and the fruit. And I was asking her, how do we reduce that plastic? I'm using the reusable bags, but I'm just not sure what else to do. And I thought that you might be curious as well to know the answer. So I invited Elisabeth on the show today to talk to us about some solutions. Welcome, Elisabeth. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Hello.
Hello. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Before we dive into the details of how to save the earth, I just wanted you to tell us a little bit about you and how you became interested in sustainability.
Yeah, I went to Utah State and was a part of their natural resource college, and but my interest in sustainability started way before that, um, where I moved from desert ocean California to Piedmont area of Virginia. Very swampy, very lots and lots of trees, and my mind was just completely open to this world of nature living right in front of your face. You could never escape it. It was always there. It was always affecting you. And that kind of closeness with the environment has driven my whole life on how connected I want to be to it and the effect I already feel like I have on it in general.
Cool. Yeah. So, what was different about California versus Virginia that made you feel like nature was right there in front of you?
Well, I think it was a lot of developmental things. I was 8 when we moved, and we went to, if anything, I was more involved with nature, you could say, in California because we would go to the beach every weekend. We were 20 minutes away. It was just something that you did. And the ocean could kill very easily. And so my mom would always take us to the side and be like, okay, here's the rip current. There, you can see it. Don't go on that part of the beach. Stay right here. She'd teach us all the things. So in that sense, it was always there. But I really think it was I was going through some traumatic things at the same time. And um, I remember very vividly, we took a train actually when we moved. We didn't fly because of my mom's health. And so on a 3-day train trip across the country, it just clicked something in me at such a young age. I remember distinctly my mom telling me that there were trees in the East Coast, and when you looked up, it looked like lace through the tree branches. And I remember driving later after the train trip. We went from California to Florida at my grandma's house and then went up to Virginia. But on the train trip, on the car trip from Florida to Virginia, it was the middle of the night. We'd been driving for hours and hours. It's a 12-hour drive. And I looked up and I could see the moon through the branches. And it was this beautiful pattern. And I asked my mom what that was, and she said it looked like lace. That's what it was. And it was just this wonderful, beautiful thing where I could get comfort. I could have an emotional reaction to what was going on around me besides don't die in the water,
Yeah.
so don't die in the beach. And so it was a very, I want to say almost visceral experience to have it be around me. And it felt like it was talking to me the whole time. Every tree I saw, it had a message and it had a story, and I had to figure it out. I had to make it up.
Wow, yeah, that's beautiful. So just I can feel your love for nature whenever you share that story, just how beautiful the trees looked and how you felt connected to them. It sounded like a hard time in your life too, where do you feel like that's maybe why you connected so much that the trees gave you comfort as well?
Oh, absolutely. I had lost a lot. I was leaving all my friends. My father was very abusive, and my mother's mentally she's mentally ill, but more in a physical way. She had brain tumors. Um, and so it was a very lonely time, even though I had, two other sisters with me. Um, and with the complete culture shift, we went from being in a very open Californian, everything's great kind of society to, even if it is conservative, to Southern, being being the minority for the first time in my life, being a Latter-day Saint, being white, you know, being pale and redheaded. It was it was a very, very, very different cultural change for me, and I couldn't make a lot of friends. I tried, and um, they had different lifestyles and different standards and different expectations for how to behave and how to act, and I didn't agree with those things. I didn't feel comfortable with those things, and so the one comfort I had was nature. I I could tell you, my mom could tell you too. I'd come home and I had these giant 6 foot tall sticks, me 4 foot whatever, coming in with these giant sticks that I'd brought in from a natural depression that had happened the day before, and was like, I found these. They're my staffs now. Like,
That's super fun. Yeah. So just
yeah.
yeah, just having such a great connection with nature and loving it and bringing it into your house. That's beautiful. So, yeah, let's shift into a little bit about um, just taking that love for nature and using it um, to respect nature more and kind of use it and bring it into habits in our daily lives. I mean, I've got reusable shopping bags. I've even bought reusable produce bags. But what other are there other simple things that we can do that
Um,
are even better than that? Yeah.
yeah, no, I really want to emphasize the fact that it's not going to be simple. I know we want a simple solution, but it's a very complex issue, and the truth resists simplicity. So when it comes to sustainability, however you define it, it's going to start in your mind. If you want it to start simple, which, I mean, that would be nice, right? But the first step, if you're going to start at all, is going to be small steps. There's going to be a lot of them, and the change is going to be huge. It's going to be a very complex thing, but it's so I would resist calling it simple steps, but they're going to be small, incremental ones. And I think the start of that would be in your mindset.
What's the big deal, I guess, for me to throw stuff away every week? Or I guess what difference does it, what difference am I making on the world if I
Right.
don't really care and keep doing whatever I'm doing?
Okay. So let's just paint a scene of a quote unquote normal suburban household.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Um, you probably have a green lawn with turf grass. You are probably going to the store once or twice a week to get the food that you need, and it's all coated in plastic for safety reasons, right? So those are good things to have plastic, but the plastic itself is not degrading. It's filling up the oceans. It's causing a chemical leach into the ground. The chemicals that you're putting into the lawn are leaching into the ground's water and surface water. It can even, I found an article that I'll share with you the link for it, but it was, or a study, um, but it was on how chemicals in turf grass were causing a significantly higher rate of cancer in dogs, which I think is a random thing that we don't think about. There's so many little things that your daily life, because of the way in which we consume, is impacting the environment around us. simply because of our cultural beginnings of we can live separate from nature.
Hmm.
And it's not a let's return back to, living in huts, but it's more of a mindset change that needs to happen of you don't live separate from nature. Everything you do impacts it. Even having a phone, having a computer, we can think of driving a car. That has impact because we've heard about it for so long. But we don't think about the fact that even though an electric car is quote unquote better for the environment, all of those materials that were made in a factory used things that might not be good for the environment. So it's really changing when it comes to sustainability. It really starts with changing your mindset in that everything that you do, everything you consume, everything you produce, everything has some sort of connection to the environment. And you have to kind of become more aware of that first before you try and change your life. Because it's going to eventually, like I said before, become a very large change that you make. And so you're going to have to start small, start, you know, now here comes the word simple, start on that lower level and not be so hard on yourself because that's one of the big things when you get to why people don't change their culture, why do we have lawns? Why do we still have cars? Why do we still use plastics? And it's all about our cultural changes and our cultural mindset. And that can only change with very simple things that we don't get upset ourselves at ourselves for.
Yeah, I think that's all really good advice for any kind of change, that um, just to be kind to yourself because there's bigger things involved, and kind of taking it slow. I also liked how you mentioned maybe our blindness to the issue in some ways, that we just don't even think about our lawn and how it affects the world. And my dad is actually always complaining about this because I come from Wyoming and we live very close to nature there, quote unquote. Um, and there's mountains and there's hardly anyone around. And he comes from a farming background. So he often teases people in the city, like they don't understand what's going on out here in the country. But for people who haven't grown up on a farm, or even honestly, even my dad has plenty of blind spots about what's going on with the environment. How do we start to educate ourselves on what's happening? Especially if I'm someone who's not super passionate about that particular thing. Is there I want to say again, simple, or like some way that I can
Yeah.
educate myself, but I don't have to get a degree in.
The answer to that really lies in using technology in a way that is mindful. We have it, it's a wonderful tool, we can use it. And it all comes down, I know this is going to sound silly, but it all comes down to your Google search. You know, take something that you use every day, like plastic, and say to Google, type into Google and say, um, Google or plastic benefits, edu. Anything with an edu will start pulling up all of the articles, not all of them, but um, articles from educational sources throughout the country and even throughout the world. If you're lucky, you'll get some Australian articles from universities out there and European ones. But even just that, I looked up today, just barely, I looked up chemical lawn treatment negative effects edu and
Mhm.
came up with an article for that article about dogs getting bladder cancer. It's really just looking at the things around you, saying what makes a computer, what's inside of a computer, negative effects to environment of computers, of TVs, of light bulbs, of anything, and just slapping edu on the end and looking through that, going through the EPA website. Like they have a great website that
Mhm.
talks about turf grass and talks about composting and does a whole thing about all these things that you can do and zero waste and using the resources that you already have but learning to use them better, and that will just be trial and error.
Yeah, I really like that suggestion because hadn't thought about that before. It's hard to kind of narrow in what's a good source, especially if you want negative effects. It sounds like you're going to pull up a lot of random
Yeah,
stuff
you're gonna
that
get
people
some
ranting.
conspiracy theories. Yeah, definitely conspiracy theorists out there. But
Yeah, yeah. So I like that idea. That's a great tip to just do EDU. And I also think that this goes back to what you said just about changing your mindset. Maybe the beginning is just noticing, just becoming aware and kind of looking in your around you and saying, "Hey, I have grass. I wonder what grass has to do with the environment, or I wonder what my house is made out of," and just kind of coming from that place of opening your eyes to things and curiosity about just the things in your environment. Does that sound right?
oh, absolutely. It comes down to wondering where, I mean, I use Amazon all the time. I love Amazon Prime. I'm one of those terrible people, and I know a lot of people hate it, and that's great for them. Um, but I love the convenience of it. They have so many things that not even Walmart. I live 5 minutes away from Walmart. I love Walmart, another terrible company. But, it's that convenience of it. And just thinking to myself, how much bad stuff is going on. I mean, not to say that fuel emissions are the number one cause of greenhouse gases because they're not, but, you know, getting more information about where those things come from. What is Amazon doing to balance out uh, their their fuel emissions? What is Walmart doing? What is eBay doing? What is Etsy doing? What are these companies trying to do, and what are they saying they're doing? And everything that's the glory of the internet, right? We can all find that out, even if it's some weird backdoor, slightly awkward conspiracy theorist that you might be able to find out an actual source that's reputable to get your answers.
Yeah, yeah. And I like how you said before, that it's not going to change our whole culture too, that you understand that we have Amazon and we have Walmart and it's bad for the environment in a lot of ways, but it's great for us in a lot of ways too. And it gives people jobs and there's other positive things about it, obviously. So maybe trying to go at it from a point of balance where we're more aware and moving towards, um, more sustainability, but not necessarily being a conspiracy theorist.
Right. And I think that really happens with being okay with where you're at right now. I mean, I can't right now make a produce bag out of cloth because I don't want to deal with it. So I'm going to go on Amazon and I'm going to search fabric bags for produce and I'm going to go like that. And then one day, hopefully, I will research how to make cloth more food friendly and I will use the scraps that I have in my house and make my own instead of ordering from Amazon or Walmart. You know, it's starting someplace where you feel comfortable, especially since most of us don't live on our own,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And and I know for myself, like I'm the only one in the household that's passionate about this stuff. My father-in-law calls me a hippie, and I mean, he's kind of right. Yeah,
We like hippies. We like hippies here.
yeah. And he uses it as like a dirty word, but I mean, that's his generation. That's fine. But yeah, it's starting where everybody can be comfortable. I did find some practical things, and I think starting with the produce bags is really good. And then I think the next place to start, um, for anyone, I think it could be a good starting place, would be to start with compost. I know it's kind of left field.
Yeah, tell us why. Well, number one, tell me why do you say start with compost?
Yeah. Compost is a way to start thinking about your waste differently. And your waste is one of the, I mean, in reality, that's your carbon footprint, quote unquote. That's your effect you're having on the environment is your waste.
Mhm.
And so thinking about your waste differently with compost would mean seeing your waste as a fuel, seeing your waste as something that can be useful and not just waste.
Okay, yeah, hold on. Let me pause you there real quick.
Yeah,
So,
sorry.
I guess this is going back to what we said. Number one, just opening our eyes and
Yeah,
starting to look around. So, one place that we can look is our waste and just noticing, number one, noticing how much waste we're creating. Maybe not only what goes in the trash can, but maybe like toys or how many cars we're buying or things like that as well.
yeah,
And then, as part of that, we've got food waste. Now, before you move on to compost, what's the big deal about food waste? Is is it a problem? I mean, it's biodegradable and shouldn't be a big deal, right?
right. It shouldn't be a big deal, but it's the way in which it's being taken care of. Um, our landfills are not a giant compost heap. You know, they're biodegradable when they're being, food is biodegradable when it's in the right setting. It needs to have specific heat, pressure, oxygen, nitrogen. It needs to have specific chemical components going on in there, and it needs to have certain biochemical processes happening to break it down. Landfills don't offer that. There's so much other stuff in them that it messes up the system. And so when it comes to starting with compost, it's using your biodegradable chicken scraps for something that would actually be biodegradable. And there are a few, I found some few practical, simple ways in which you could start composting.
Yeah, yeah. Let's move into those because actually this is really relevant to the podcast because a lot of my listeners are plant-based eaters, which means we eat a lot of vegetables, and there's a lot of food waste that goes with that, just like the bottom of the cauliflower or the whatever pieces are left over. So that's what most of my trash was. And I wanted to look into doing composting, but my apartment didn't allow a compost bin outside. And I kind of looked at the ones inside, but that seemed complicated. My husband didn't want worms in our house. So
What?
I know. I can't believe that. And anyway, so I was just having trouble understanding what I could do. Eventually, they got a compost system to come, which was awesome. But I guess maybe you can speak to people who are still stuck in an apartment and then give us a couple ideas of where to start there. And then maybe people who have a little bit more freedom who are in a house or something like that.
Yeah, so let's just start in the basics in your kitchen. In your kitchen, there's basically two options for composting. One is an actual composter that it processes it all in its own bin, and it has a little nozzle on it. So you can open up the nozzle and pour out basically the juices, the good, wonderful juices of your compost. And then the rest kind of works on its own, and there are some complications to it, but that's essentially what it is.
Okay.
That's, I think, the best one for an apartment. You can use the juices that come from it for your houseplants. I would suggest getting houseplants if you live in an apartment because they will make you happy. Um, and some people are daunted by that if you're not a plant person. But to those people, I just say learn how to take care of a plant, which you can find the science behind that, and that helps a lot. But so that's the smallest one. The second one, besides one that has a little nozzle on it, is simply a small compost bin that you use to carry to a bigger compost bin. And it's got a charcoal filter in it so it doesn't smell. It's got a lid on it. Most of those you can find are stainless steel, so you're not going to be dealing with plastic. The charcoal filter can be rinsed out with soapy water and it's clean again. So a lot of it is already working toward that zero waste, that sustainability aspect. And then once it's full, you carry that bin, which is about, some of them are as small as like 1.5 gallons, just like a jug of milk, basically. You carry that to a bigger compost bin that you can have in a garage, or even I found one that's about 5 gallons that also has a nozzle, and that would be where you would carry it out to. You could carry it to maybe a porch, or that also has um, a smell filter on it as well, so you wouldn't even have to worry about where you kept that one. You could just keep it somewhere nicer than on your counter.
Yeah, okay, so I like that. So there's a couple smaller options that we can look at and maybe again use our friend Google to search out how best to use those things. Maybe we could buy it on Amazon, have it shipped, right?
I know, exactly. Some of them, I did find one that was from Lowe's. So, I mean, Lowe's gets shipped from somebody else, but I mean, unless you're going to make it yourself from
Yeah,
materials that you
like
buy from somewhere, like smelt your own metal. Like,
right, right. Yeah, we just use the tools that we have. Yeah, great though.
yeah.
But even that, even we tease about it, but even using Amazon for that, then every week there's pounds and pounds of trash that you're not sending out to the dumpster. You're able to reuse that. And maybe if you don't want to have plants yourself, then you can set up a business and sell that stuff, or just give it to your neighbor or dump it on your grass outside or something, right?
Yeah, you do have to be, this stuff, it is concentrated, so you do have to be careful with it. You can very easily find instructions. The instructions come with the composters. I think that's the other big thing, is that people are afraid to start composting because they don't know how to do it, and it can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. If you're doing it in your backyard, if you've got like a big pile of compost and you don't know what you're doing, yes, it can get a little bit dangerous. But if you have a small little guy that comes with an instruction booklet, you know, you're gonna be okay. It's gonna be a lot easier than you think it'll be.
Yeah, yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So we've got composting, and just start with the little one. Maybe don't jump straight into worms if you're not ready for that.
Worms worms are different. If you're okay with worms, worms are also really good. The stuff that they, if you start a worm bin, it's called vermicomposting. If you start with worms, then that it can be really, really good for small apartments as well, because they eat the food a lot faster, and it's a much more organic process that's going on. But they also end up putting out less of the juices, you could say. You know, the ending compost that you use is much smaller in amount, but it's
Right.
also much more potent. So it would work really well if you have someone who's okay with having worms in your house, which I'm so sorry about that. Worms are so cool. But but if you have it in a small apartment, it's perfect, because you might only have room for, you might not even have good windows for a lot of plants. You might just be able to have a couple of ZZ plants, you know, the Zanzivario mother-in-law tongue plants, you know those? Anyway, but even if you have a couple of plants, the worm vermiculite or vermicomposting stuff that you end up with, product, you could say, is more potent, and you have to use smaller amounts. So it's better for if you only have a couple of plants.
Yeah, yeah, that all
Anyway.
sounds really good.
Yeah, so the step up for houses would be to graduate to an actual composting bin. And I did find, I think the trash, you could just use a metal trash can, punch some holes into it, and have a go. That to me is a little scary. Because composting, you have a lot of built up gases, and because the trapped gases they're flammable, like boisterously flammable. So you just need to be careful. Don't just start chucking stuff in a pile in your backyard. That's all I was going toward on that one.
Yeah, so it does take some care. So,
Yeah,
so
but
definitely read up on that.
do you know much about composting?
I have researched it a little bit, but I'm sure there are others on the on the call who others listening to this who probably don't have a good idea. I've tried my hand at almost all of them, and my personality is not attention to detail. I think my favorite
Yeah,
composting method, honestly, is we have some guinea pigs now.
there you go.
Yeah, and they
Yeah,
like vegetables. So
yeah,
there's a few vegetables that they don't eat, but honestly, they've been taking care of things. So I just throw all of our scraps in there, and it comes out the other end. You can use that and spread it on your grass if you need to, and
yeah.
great.
See, and I think that's a great option too for a lot of things. I mean, you might want to get, I mean, for those. What about when you do that kind of composting, with guinea pigs? I guess you could say it's not really composting, but um, you're not, yeah, anyway. But how do you do that with like leftovers?
Oh yeah, so with leftovers, they don't if it's something that I packed in my kids' lunch, like
Mm.
some vegetables that they were gonna eat with some hummus, and they don't eat them, then I'll give them to the guinea pigs.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, they don't like potatoes. There's certain things that they don't like, and they don't
Funny.
eat beans, obviously. So
Yeah.
I just try to honestly, I have a system that minimizes leftovers a lot that I use. And I actually made a course on it, which we'll hear about in the future, called the Messy
Wow.
Method course. But other than that, I actually do have worms also now. They're
Good.
allowed in the garage. So I have several things going on in my house, but that's a lot. That's pretty complicated for the beginner. I think I liked your first suggestion, which is just get the little one. It comes with instructions. Try that out first. You don't have to have
Yeah.
a PhD. You just work with that and then start where you're at and build up from there. And if you're really interested in it, then you can go out and do all that research that's
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah,
But
but they do have the last option though for having it more contained. Suburban homes, they they don't want to smell a compost heap uh, around, but they do have these composting bins, and they can be a various different amount of sizes. A lot of them are plastic, but if you do some digging, I did find a couple from Lowe's that were metal within a good price range. Some of them some of these fancy ones were like $700 online, and I found a couple that were under 200. So you do have some options there, and it's a different system in which it's done in a bin, and so it makes it safer because it's contained for one, and for two, you can you can turn it basically like one of those bingo ball, you
yeah,
know, lottery ball spinners. But you can turn it so that the gases are able to be uh, moved around more, and your composting can be done in a safer manner for the small areas. For that though, you need a bigger family. So this is definitely for people that have like 8 kids.
I don't know about that, but yeah, you need a lot more vegetable output for that sort of thing.
You do. Yeah, four kids probably that are all vegan, or like, you need a bigger family or a bigger output definitely for one of those guys. But that is a very good option for that.
Okay, great, great. So we could start with compost and explore our various options or guinea pigs, right? And
Hmm.
we talked about produce bags.
Hmm.
Is there one other thing that you think that we could do if we're just starting out besides the mindset and those other two things?
Well, I feel like there's two. One of them is going to your local food place and just finding out if they would be willing to give you stuff in your own containers. There
Mm,
are some, excuse me, there are some grocery stores that will allow that. And you could even research online grocery stores that are already doing it to see the ways in which they're making it safe, because you do need sanitary products. Um, but you can, I'm sure that you can find some, not sure, okay, I take that back. But you might be able to find a grocery store near you that would allow you to bring your own uh, Tupperwares or glass or containers for bringing in your stuff in bulk. So that cauliflower, those carrots, Fresh Time might have some that are out of the bundle, out of the bundle. Uh, I mean, but also what I've noticed too is that the foreign food supermarkets tend to have more of their produce out of packaging,
hmm.
because for whatever reason they might be getting it from different sources. They have more variety of vegetables, but whatever it is, they have a lot of times cheaper produce, but also it's not as much in plastic packaging. Now when it comes to your spinach and your leafy greens, that's going to be harder. I would simply, this is going to sound silly, but I would simply grow it. Lettuce is really fun to do in a pot. You can do it in a big 10-inch pot if you're in an apartment. You can do it in your yard if you have one. In a very small yard, you could do it in like a 3 foot by 4 foot area. You could totally plant a couple of lettuce heads. But going from that perspective, you could definitely to try and minimize your plastic usage. Just looking at your packaging, looking at the boxes that you're using, seeing what you do with the box that has your macaroni in it, seeing what you do with all of these things, noticing your actions and trying to minimize the amount of plastic that's in them.
Okay, yeah, that sounds really good. So maybe if you're not quite ready for gardening, there's at least some different grocery stores that you can explore, or maybe a farmer's market nearby where you can bring your own bags. Maybe the best thing that I like to do when there's things that I don't care to do, I like to find a friend who loves doing that and do a little bit of an exchange or something, you know. We don't all have the same passions, but that could be an option as well. Really cool.
Yeah, and there are, I know this was in another place that I lived, but they had a co-op of grocery um, getters. You know, they would just get a bunch of produce, and a lot of that stuff was unpackaged as well. So that might be an
Yeah, I
option.
think I'm not sure what we have in our area, but I've seen that ugly produce too that usually comes in a box
Yeah,
as well. Yeah, so those are really good ideas. I like all of those. And you said there was one more tip that you had for us?
yeah. One more tip. It again is looking more at the broad view. You know, we're charged. A lot of your listeners are probably changing the way that they're eating, a lot of the things that they're taking into their bodies, um, to help their bodies be healthier, but also thinking about your home in general, trying to make your home a healthier place for the environment. And a lot of that we can't help, you know, we move into it. But when it comes to the stuff that's coming in, so the big thing with zero waste, when you look up the EPA website, um, is changing it from reuse, reduce, recycle to repair, reuse, and I think give away or something like that. There's another R. They still have it. Um, I looked it up and everything and I forgot it. But basically looking at anything in your home that you're wanting to throw out and instead saying, can I fix it? And if I can't fix it, does someone I know might be able to fix it? And then thinking to yourself, if I can't fix it, can I reuse it for something different? And then taking it and saying, okay, I'll give it away. I'll find someone who wants it. You could probably sell it. Honestly, there's anyone on the internet willing to buy anything, but you could
Especially
give it to
yeah.
Goodwill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's a lot of things, but that goes for clothing, furniture, uh, electronics, anything like that. There's a lot of ways, and it's the way we used to live. It's the way a lot of people in the 40s, 30s, and 20s lived. And it's not that that was a golden age, but it was definitely a better age for living frugally. So you're going to be saving lots of money, and not lots, but you're going to be saving an amount. But it's also a way of reducing your waste so that, you know, the next time you need to wipe down the counter, you're not thinking, oh, I need to use a paper towel. You're thinking, no, I'm just going to use the strips of material I made out of the bed sheets that I stained, you know, and I'm going to wipe down the counter with that after you washed them, obviously.
Right, right. Oh, okay. So I really like those. I heard several tips in there, but
Yeah,
um,
sorry.
just thinking, yeah, but overall, just thinking of ways that we can reuse things around our house. And I also, while you were talking, I was thinking of what comes in our house in general. My kids are at the age where they just want to buy a ton of toys. Every time we go places, they buy toys. And when they go to school, they get those cheap little dollar store toys that come in our house, and then they go right out. They just go right to the trash. So I think thinking about that sort of thing as well. And I think it goes back to the mindset that you're talking about, the mindset of maybe how do we want to live our lives, and then communicating with with people around you. So for the toys, for example, I like to tell people, well, I do it with candy so far. Don't give my kids candy because it's just going to go in the trash. Don't give my kids toys like that. I mean, obviously saying it in a nice way, like, hey, these are some values that we have, and offering them another option.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think that's a huge component. I also think um, giving, especially when it comes to children, giving yourself and giving your children another outlet. So they're gonna, if the child says, no, I don't want it, the toy or whatever, like, I don't, children are gonna be who they want to be. So of course you're gonna have a child that's like so very dedicated to getting that little thing that's like a squishy or whatever. But if you can try, and I'm sure you have, but I don't know, I don't want to sound judgy because I don't have children, but trying to give them something different to do might be helpful. Helping them think differently about toys might help you get them to be their own proponents of better living. So helping them create toys out of the stuff that they have, learning how to do scrap dolls, or learning how to make stuffed animals at home, or sorry, everything I think about is fabric, but you know, maybe trying to find different ways on the beautiful blessed internet to make new kinds of toys and things that they create so that they have ownership over it, and maybe have a little bit more interest in those things.
Yeah, no, I think those are all really good ideas. Well, yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show and giving us all some things to think about. If nothing else, maybe for anyone listening, the goal could be just to pick out one thing that you heard on the episode today and like open your mind to it. Do a little Google search with that edu at the end and kind of go from there. But is there anything else before we go, that you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, again, to like you said and what we've talked about, to start small, forgive yourself, and move forward.
Yoo-hoo! Thanks for jamming with me. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and click subscribe before you leave, and I'll see you next time for another great episode of the I Cut the Mustard show.